Hey there, all you friends, MrAyrit here. Welcome back to the channel. Got a quick amp review for you today. This review is going to be for the aiyma A07 Max. This has been just another amp that I wanted to test as I'm sorting out my main listing stereo system down here in the basement. So we'll dig into what this little guy is, what its specs are. We'll look at inputs, outputs, all that stuff, and then ultimately we'll talk about sound and whether or not I think it's a decent value or not. So let's dig in. Before we look at the unit itself, let me just show you the power supply. So it comes with a pretty big brick here. The one that mine came with was just the 36 volt 5 amp, or excuse me, 36 volt 6 amp. Now this amplifier does scale with a better power supply, so you can get like a 48 volt and hook it up. I didn't try that. I only tried this guy, but just wanted to show you what that was. Okay, so now let's look at the unit itself. It's a pretty basic gray box, right? Black. Well, it's black. It's got like a gray front to it here. Volume knob is okay. It's also the power button. If you switch around the back here, you can see RCA in. It's got an auxiliary out that you can use for like a subwoofer and stuff. And then you got power in, and then you got your binding post, and you can see right there that it says mono on those guys, so you can hook this up. That was actually why I got this, guys, because you can hook it up to mono. There is a little switch on the bottom for you to toggle in order to get it into mono mode, and we'll talk about that more here in just a little bit. So it's a pretty bare bones unit, if I'm being pretty honest, but that's okay, because what I wanted to use it for was I recently built a subwoofer enclosure for a passive subwoofer, and I wanted to use this in mono mode for that guy. And so basically I compared this with the Fozzy ZA3 and the original aiyma A07 running that subwoofer. And then I also, I tried this guy in stereo mode too, just to see how it stacked up against the ZA3. That's kind of my main stereo amp right now. So I started with the A07 Max, and oh, sorry, I was gonna jump into specs here first. It says like 300 watt. Well, let me just look it up. So it uses the TPA 3255 chip, which is everybody's kind of raving about these days. And interestingly enough, they give you specs for like a 24 volt power supply up through a 48 volt power supply. Again, it ships with a 36 though, so that's kind of interesting. But basically, it's stereo. It's into 4 ohms, 107 watts, 6 ohms, 100 watts, and then 94 watts into 8 ohms. And then in mono, it is 190 watts, 150 watts, 118 watts, respectively, for those different ohms. You know what, though? I'm not sure that I really believe those numbers. I mean, I don't have anything to measure it. I'm just going based off of, like, when I was testing the other amplifiers, what the sub sounded like, specifically, and the power coming out of that. But, again, we'll dive into that here momentarily. I mean, my system didn't sound bad. I have the Soundcast SGD1, and it's running into a pair of Emotiva T0 Plus towers. Then I have a Yamo powered sub, and I have my passive sub as well. And so I was kind of switching like the ZA3 and the A07 and the A07 Max around as to which one was running stereo, which one was running the subwoofer, etc. And, I didn't think it sounded bad when I had the A07 Max hooked up to the Emotivas. But I honestly don't think they're going to sound bad with like any reasonable amp hooked up to them either. So, but yeah, so anyway, I had it hooked up to the Emotivas first to kind of just see how it stacked up as a stereo amp. I didn't think it sounded bad, but I also didn't find it like super engaging either. I honestly thought it was pretty dull. It was definitely a warmer sounding amplifier, but I just didn't feel like there was a lot there as far as like image information and separation stuff. It just didn't sound like real fantastic, honestly. I switched to the ZA3 after listening to this guy for a little bit on the Emotivas and kind of flip-flopped them with the sub and the stereo speakers. And oh my gosh, dude, the ZA3 is so much like there's just so much more clarity and so much more separation and just more information just in general. It was kind of shocking, honestly, like how much better I personally think the ZA3 is than the A07 Max, especially when it comes to driving like a set of stereo speakers. It was night and day difference, honestly. Like it was a huge difference. And so that was strike one against the A07 Max here. The other odd thing, though, is that like when I would swap this in to power my subwoofer, is I could barely get this thing, even in mono mode, like I could barely get this thing to even move that sub, and it's a 4 ohm sub that's rated that it should have, like 150 watts going into it, which on paper it sounds like this thing should be perfect for it, which is why I ordered it. But it like honestly like could barely drive it, I felt like. And it was interesting because I did try it in stereo and then I switched it to mono, and honestly like I think it was louder running just one channel out of the stereo into that subwoofer than it was in mono. Really, really weird. And then comparing it to the original A07 and just running one channel into it, is I thought the original A07 was louder than this power in that subwoofer. So I'm not really sure what's going on with the power in that sub, but I guess where this leaves me with this little amplifier is like I question it and I don't know. I just don't know. Like I guess I wouldn't buy it is what it comes down to. It didn't meet the need that I needed it to do, right? Like I assumed that it would drive that sub really, really well. And I mean the sub sounds okay, but it's not driving it anywhere near what I thought it would. Maybe when this is in mono mode versus the original A07 in stereo, maybe it's just like a little bit cleaner bass. Maybe. Honestly, it's super hard to tell the difference, and but like I don't know, guys. I wasn't impressed. And when I looked at this on Amazon, it said there's like a warning, like lots of people return this amplifier. So it sounds like quite a few other people aren't super pleased with it as well. So the original A07 has been powering, honestly, it powered like my bookshelf speakers in my bedroom for a long, long time. Not that I think that amp is super fantastic. I mean, I'll drop the review to that one down below. But it's only like $55 now. So I think that one, I kind of look at that and go, yeah, that's a pretty reasonable amp for $55. This one being like almost like 90. I just don't think so. I don't know. Especially when it's in such stark contrast to the ZA3, which you can buy for $130 with a 36 volt. So a little bit more money, but like that amp, I am pretty confident is much superior to this one. So I think this is a pass personally. If you want the original A07, I mean, now that one's down to like $55, I think that's a okay budget entry into amplifiers, but I think the Fozzy ZA3 is kind of the amp to beat at this point in time. I did see that they are releasing, like I don't have the information on it really, but it looks like there's going to be a new mono amp that doesn't have stereo that Fozzy is releasing that I assume is very similar to the ZA3, except it's just not stereo. It's just totally mono. So if you are interested in mono, I'm guessing that one will be pretty reasonably priced too, and will probably meet this application better than this guy does. So I'll probably look into getting one of those, and maybe even I'll see if Fozzy will send me one. So stick around if that sounds interesting to you. What's your experience with this little amp or other amps like it? Do you have a budget amp that you recommend to people? I'd be interested in any of those comments, alternative opinions, any of that stuff. Drop it down below. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one, and hopefully we'll see the Hawkeyes in the Final Four here. So thanks for watching. Have a good one. Go Hawks.